All right, it's a special episode of the Big Douglas Show. I'm always excited a couple times a year to get my buddy Chris Long on, talk a little football. Chris, what's happening?
Nothing, man. It's good to see you. It's good to see your teams, as we were just talking about, competitive, fun to watch. You like them Thursday, by the way. I'm thinking about putting them in a big teaser.
Yeah, so I'm gonna actually post this on Thursday, so it'll still be out before the game. But yeah, I do. I mean, what's crazy to me, and you tell me because you watched the Lions a little bit more than me, but they started out as a touchdown favorite and like down to 5.5.
Yeah, I don't know what
Yeah,
that
QB
movement's
one
about.
for the Bears are out. Eddie Jackson's out.
Uh,
Brisker may not play. Like,
yeah, I feel like the matchups in the secondary are good, and I don't feel like the Bears front scaring anybody necessarily. But I think the biggest advantage, hopefully, is up front for y'all, because I
They
don't
don't
think
they don't got Kyle Long on that offensive line
No,
anymore.
they don't, bro. They've actually been lower half by ways in protecting the quarterback. If Fields looks like he looked the other day, the ball's going to be moving, but those guys up front might have something to say about it.
What do you like at 5.5?
I don't like anything at 5.5. I think that's a
Well,
really.
yeah.
Here's what I like: teasing that deal with. I was looking at another game. I really like Detroit. Looking at it today, but they're laying a bunch of points, so I would tease it with somebody and get it down to a pick 'em or grab a couple points.
How do you prefer to lay lines or bet parlays?
I like laying lines.
Sprinkle a little bit of everything.
I put a little bit on the parlays. Like I'll come into a Sunday on a day where I actually have control over myself, and I'll have one big teaser. And teasers, of course, you can manipulate the line on both lines by 6 points, but then they both got to hit. So, like for instance, I would buy a point on the teaser and get Detroit to -3, where I feel pretty good, and then also get the Commanders at like +1.5 now where the line sits. So, but both those have to hit. So I'll put in a big teaser, and then the parlays I just do the stuff I'm not as sure about and throw some BS
And
together. But
hope.
that's where you always get in trouble, like too much activity. But it's hard when you do this for a living and you sit in a room with 7 TVs and there's weed and there's
All the
liquor and
things.
yeah, there's all the stuff. So yeah.
And then wages can get silly. Yeah, it's funny you brought that up. I guess we can get back to the games later, but I want to parlay into the podcast. You have the option, I know this, to be able to get on. People were curious about who you'd sign on with when the podcast. What are you 4 years in now? Is this
Yeah,
year 4
4 years
for
in.
Greenlight?
Yep.
That's what I thought. And there's a couple of guys that are doing it the way that you've done it.
Yeah.
And you got a little startup money, so you did
Yeah.
it yourself, which I respect. And instead of going like you've got guys that have moved to Austin, right? You got a lot of these pockets where people are doing their own thing. They're
Yeah.
doing it out in Nashville. You're
Yeah.
down in Charlottesville. Instead of going to the big spots, what was the thought there about building in Charlottesville and saying, you know what, we'll bring the people in.
Yeah, I think
And for
probably
those, real quick, without
yeah.
cutting you off, for those that don't know, and I hope you don't mind me asking, but I'm
Yeah.
assuming like you guys fly people in. I mean, how
So
does the intricate side of that work?
so mostly, and this is kind of like, well, I'll go backwards. There's two reasons I did podcasting. Number one, because I look at my second act as I poured everything into my first one. It dictated my lifestyle. It took years off my life. So this one, I want to work hard because I'm a workaholic. I know that about myself, but I want to build it around my life the way I want to live it. And, I'm a Charlottesville guy. I grew up here. All my buddies are here. Like I went to a Government Mule concert Friday with like 5 of my buddies. We
Right.
went to another show. We're out on the river every Saturday. That stuff is way more important to me than making a little bit more money or getting more eyeballs, especially get more eyeballs. Because quite frankly, the more success we have, the less I like it sometimes because you got to deal with more people. More people are hearing your opinion, have an opinion on it. There's more people that don't listen to your pod that catch up, through aggregation or whatever. So I'm not like I've kind of built this thing around how I want to live and geography first. That was number one, and then number two is I don't like being on TV. Now I'm on TV once a week, but I don't really consider it like a TV kind of gig. It's inside the NFL. It's a studio show, but I don't have to travel on the weekends. I get a really fun crew to work with. We're only once a week,
That's in
where
New York or Philadelphia? Where's
we're
that
in Philly.
recorded at?
That's another
Yeah.
positive is like, hey, it's 4.5 hour drive. I hop in an SUV on Monday, watch games, do work, sit in the back and, kind of get my work done. And so it worked out for me. Now, as far as like how we operate, we mostly do Zoom. So
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
been, and the pandemic, I feel like gave a lot of people latitude on that because I don't know what it was like before the pandemic. I barely remember. uh, and I definitely wasn't in the space for long before the pandemic. So, whereas before it was like, yeah, and still it's true. In-person interviews are king. People love that connection, the visuals. Like when I started doing this, I want to do an audio podcast. But about a year and a half in, I realized everybody's on TV basically via YouTube, and there's a lot of money there. So I think it's trying to, when somebody does come into town, catch them. Chris Stapleton's in tonight for for a show. Or tomorrow for a show. Now I'm not going to get Chris Stapleton, but if
Why
somebody
not?
else, well, it's hard. The man's in high demand. But if
I bet
somebody
that's
else
right.
if somebody else comes in town who kind of fits the bill and or a teammate's driving through, like Nate Ebner from the Patriots drove through, or the great thing is Kyle, my brother lives here, so I got a teammate in town, the whole thing. People love the in-person stuff. I've also noticed that sometimes it doesn't matter who the guest is if you look at the numbers.
As
I
far as
think
in person goes.
yeah, in person or on, yeah, that hasn't really changed much for us. What I think people are into is this, like people
Yeah.
just want to hear a conversation. And so I've just tried to stick to number one, living my life the way I want to live it and building a job around it. And then two, like find a way that I can just be myself and do the pod the way I want to do it. Because if I'm being myself, it's not as much like work. And
Yeah.
so just finding a groove with that.
Chris, it feels like with the podcast, and not just yours, but others, but I've noticed it with yours, that the access, not the Rolodex that you have as far as players go, I get that. And as the goalposts are kind of getting moved
Yeah.
further into podcast,
Yeah.
like more people accept it and realize it.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never seen like access to the GMs before and head coaches that you guys have kind of gotten this year. That
Yeah.
generally in the past, those guys do like 5-minute radio hits when they're required.
Yeah.
They don't generally sit down and do 20-minute, like, let's have a chat type deals. And I found them really interesting. Have you
It's
been
been cool.
surprised with that?
Yeah. I have been surprised. I mean, like number one, my guest bookers are doing a good job. And like I employ guys who, for the most part, have never done this job before. Like we've got a couple guys behind the camera, Cowboy Reed, he keeps the lights on. He makes sure that I'm straight for my Big Doug interview. He makes sure all the
He's
things
the
are
best.
edited. He's like the jack of all trades. I got Nolan, who was up in Philly before this, working in the NFL. Me and him sit down and watch film. We go through the topics. I got a football guy in the building who's great. I've got Matt, who you probably talked to a little bit. We went to high school together, and he's become another jack of all trades and become a guest booker. Like, he was a teacher at his last job, but we've tried to like figure out ways to get guys up to speed on what's the expectation in the industry. And I think these guys have done a really good job of picking up. And so like this off season, we just started making relationships with teams. And, I think you got to be honest about teams, but I try not to be too negative because you
Sure.
never know, like, you never know what head coach is listening. And, like, even if you're being negative, just be fair. And I think people that listen to the pod for the most part see that. That like my objective isn't to kill guys. And I do it all the time where I'll get out of a segment and I'll ask the guys like constantly, like, was I too harsh?
Right.
Because
Right.
I was a player and I did it last night. I'm talking about Daniel Jones, and you come out and you're like, you kind of feel icky because you're like, you had to be negative about something, a guy on the
You can
field.
do it respectfully, right?
But you try to do it respectfully and in a way that people aren't like, he's just giving me the company line.
Right.
You want it to
Yes.
be like my real thoughts, but respectful. And I think for the most part, people look at that and they say, hey, you go on this show, they're not going to try to get you. Like I'll tell a GM, I'm not trying to get you. I just want to have a good conversation, you know. And I think it's played out well. I mean, having coaches and GMs on is like one of my favorite things, and people really respond to it because they are themselves. They're talking to a player, you know, like whether it's fair or not, that is the advantage I have over some other guys in the industry is, you know, when a coach gets on, he feels like he's talking to somebody in his office or in the meeting room, and that's a good vibe for us.
Yeah, because I would think like again, responsibilities for some of these guys are I gotta go do a 5-minute radio hit with some guys at the radio that may or may not actually know ball. And I'm sure they're much more tight than they are with you,
And there's
right? I
just
mean,
yeah, there's just also like different motivations for doing it. And I think the coaches and the media
yeah,
relations people know who's who. And
right.
like, hey, you know, people got jobs to do. Beat writers have jobs to do. Beat writers are trying to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and put a critical and hyper local spin on it. So they're digging for anything they can get on a daily basis. And sometimes being a beat writer, you have to kind of get in the mud. And so like, hey, I respect what they're doing, but I know also that like a coach, when he sees like that reporter who's asking the tough questions every week, is going to be less excited about that interview, and he is about kind of like the new media, whatever you want
Right.
to call it, like former players, guys that my currency is not getting a big quote out of somebody. My currency is more like I want to play the long game, and I want somebody to actually have to sit down and enjoy the interview and enjoy the context and nuance around it and sink into a 10-minute topic on something that they're not somewhere else. You know, the bites, that'll get you there quick, but you might burn a bunch of bridges. You might it might not be sustainable. And quite frankly, I don't think most people want to hear the sensationalist stuff. They want to hear about the details.
I completely agree with you. And it's much more authentic that way. Was there a guest that you had on? I've done, I don't know, 400 of these shows, and there's been a couple of guys over the years here that have made me a little nervous. Have
Yeah.
you had a guy that
Oh
they said,
yeah.
"Hey, Chris, this is who you got to," and you're like, "Really?"
Yeah, I get nervous all the time. I even get nervous just like doing the podcast sometimes because it's not kind of who I like. It's not who I am. I don't think when I get out of here, I don't think I'm like running around trying to run people down to have a conversation. And I've been in this chair where like people are booking me and I know how it feels sometimes. You're like, fuck, I have that thing. Or like whatever, you know, and what's his name? Kyle Brandt had a funny rant about
It
this
was
with
great. It
it
was
was
great.
funny and like it was harsh, but everybody knows what he's talking about.
I need 20
Although
minutes.
although I still like you hit me up, I want to come on the show. Like, you know, like
Yeah.
it's good to see you. It's good to see the people that you're regulars with, but everybody has a podcast. And so I do get nervous about like, hey, welcome to the pod. I know you're probably having a great time today. And sometimes you get a guest like Matthew McConaughey. I had him and I was really nervous. I read his book like in 3 days. I haven't read a book in like a year. But I read his book and like I'm not proud of
No
that.
line you read and didn't listen.
Yeah. I was deep in that thing, and then I was reading the hard copy, and he comes on the interview, and I'm like, Matt, welcome, you know, the whole thing, and you know, we get talking, and right before the thing comes on, right before cutting it on, he's like, oh yeah, and one more thing. He goes, I don't know if you remember that chapter in the book, but like my mama doesn't like it when people call me Matt. So, you know, and I was like, and they were like, all right, you guys ready? Go. And I was like, it's like throwing a
Awkward.
pick six the first drive of the game. And it turned out to be a great interview. And he warmed up and he was warm the whole time, really. I just think he's matter of fact. But like when you're in my chair, I like gulped. I was like, geez, I just got this pit in my stomach. I've been nervous in situations like that. I love Freddie Gibbs. He's one of my favorite rappers.
Yeah.
And we had Freddie Gibbs on, and I was like, holy shit, we landed Freddie Gibbs. I can't wait. He gets on and he's like on a cell phone in his car, like driving. He's like eating food. And you're just like, oh, this is going to suck. But then it turned out to be the best interview in the world. Like his
Right.
mom's picking him up from the airport. His mom is on the podcast. You just got to learn to roll with the punches, you know,
Yes.
because for the most part, they're here because they said yes or their publicist said yes. I think sometimes if you're like one of these big time people who book big guests who are on like media tours and that sort of thing, and we've had that, they could very well be irritated with the situation. And I think
But
that's
time
when,
is such an essence for these guys.
and they're like, I didn't mean to book this, or like, why am I on this show? I get nervous sometimes talking to comedians because they're so out there, you know,
We
they're
had
very
Roy
dark.
Wood Jr. on, me and
Yeah.
Pooh, and it was like it was fantastic,
Well,
right?
he
But
seems cool.
also, oh,
He
he was
seems
great.
cool.
He was great.
It's these emo white comedians that I'm
I don't know
nervous to
any of
talk
those.
to.
So
Exactly. You know, like you get one of
those guys aren't in my Rolodex,
these
Chris.
real sickos, but like Roy Wood Jr. Yeah. I mean, I'd be like, yeah, this is gonna be awesome. It's gonna be raucous, the whole thing. But I get nervous about some of these musicians because musicians are artsy. You might ask a question and you don't realize it, but you just hit this sore spot,
Yeah.
and you just see their whole face change, and they're different, man. They're musicians. So
Yeah. And you're like, don't you hate it when they ask you to play that one song? And he's like, yeah, I also hate it when people
when
ask that
people ask me,
question.
exactly, dude. So I don't know. I don't know the rules. With football players, I know the rules. Like
Sure.
I know the do's and don'ts. I don't know it in some industries.
Do you have a wish list?
Yeah, Willie Nelson.
You better hurry up. He ain't
Yeah,
getting
well,
younger.
he looks great though. I was just at
He
his
does.
90th birthday party thing in LA where, he had a bunch of artists out there, a bunch of musicians, Hollywood Bowl, the whole thing. I'd say Willie's on my list. I would say as far as rappers are concerned, like Kendrick Lamar would be terrific. It's never going to happen, but
It
Kendrick
will
Lamar
happen.
in 10
It
years
will happen.
maybe if I get a Netflix show. There's people, yeah, I could run you a list like a mile long, but I
Yeah.
think more than anything, it's just all I want is somebody who's happy to be there and has a good conversation. Because my co-host is a real estate agent, like you don't need to be, people are into some of the conversations because it's evident we know each other and we're
Yeah.
way different, but we know each other. And I think what works is good combo. It doesn't matter who it is.
How long does it take to put the show script together?
Well, it depends. Like during the week, the process is kind of interesting to peel the curtain back, but like we do three shows a week. So, and we do a live stream on Sunday. We just watch the 1 p.m.s or like the
Right.
4 p.m.s, depending. And so as soon as I wake up Sunday, that's if I had a calendar, my week really starts on Sunday, like unlike everybody else. Cause it's like, hey, from noon to 3 a.m. on Sunday, I'm working, wake up, do the 10 a.m. live show. That's all prep for the show. It's hard, but it's self-explanatory. It's like do the games. And then, it gets a little harder during the week sometimes. We're doing a Stanford Steve show. We're doing a football preview. So everything is every game we want to hit all that. The Steve show's easy. Steve's such a pro.
Love Steve.
He's just the best. And,
Yeah.
like he knows anything about college football there is to know. So it feels good to just say, hey, I take Saturday pseudo off. I'll gamble on some games, but I'm not like, I don't know
That's how
what
I like to
happened.
do it.
Yeah. And so when Steve comes on, he does the show and it makes it easy. When I got to do the whole preview, it's an hour-long preview. I'd probably say it takes 6-8 hours to get ready for that preview, 6 hours. So that's just the one show. And then, obviously 12 to 14 on the Sunday show. And then the Wednesday show is kind of a nice break. So I think it just depends on the show. But I'm working all week because if I'm going to talk about the NFL, let's not kid ourselves. There's not a local beat writer that I know more about, in their individual market. There are people who are
Oh, yeah.
experts on their teams. Somebody that covers the Commanders knows more about the Commanders than me. I'm a national podcast that's like worried about every team. So I think the hardest part is like figuring out how much do I need to know. I think I need to watch every game every week. I think I need to read about every game every week, but I also don't want to get out over my skis and try to be Mr. Expert on a really like minute level, because that's where you get caught with your pants down. Cause like there are fans, I'll miss little injuries. You can't expect me to know everything. And somebody will be like, he's up this week, idiot. I'm like, oh, well, fuck, there's 200 other guys.
Somebody's always calling an idiot somewhere, right?
You know, so I think that's the hard thing is just find the balance of like, hey, I want to be an expert, but you know, like I don't know about your team as well as you do sometimes, and baking that in the show. Tell me what you think, you know.
The big networks have guys that do the research on that. Do you have a squad? Are you doing most of the
Yeah.
work? What does that look like for like? Because I don't think people realize that, you know, like these around the horn guys have like
Oh, they do.
books. They have books that they read through. I'm not suggesting that's what you have, but while we're
No,
peeling the curtain back a little bit, I think people
no.
will be interested to know how that kind of works for you.
What I try to do is I try to watch every game, right? Like, so on Sunday, we're watching all the games live, right? But we're doing the 1 p.m.s, we're entertaining. We are watching the games. I'm during the live stream being like, hey, Nolan, write that down. Nolan, did you
Yeah.
see that? He's writing things down. Then we get to the 4 p.m.s, which is nice because there's a couple games, and sometimes they're all cheeks. So what you do is you kick that can down the road, kind of watch because you're gambling on it. But we'll start meeting about 4 on all the 1 p.m.s, ordering the ones we want to watch on all 22. I'm going to watch 4 games on all 22, like freeze frame, the whole thing. Then there's games that I'm watching the condensed version, you know, just on Sunday. So I have something to talk about Monday. And, you know, occasionally there'll be a game I'm just reading about. Like last week, Cowboys Niners. I'm not going to pretend on the Monday show like I got to that on all 22. We're just going to talk in really broad strokes about it on the back half of the show. But I've watched every game by the time it's Wednesday, because, you know, like, and there's different ways that you could watch a game. You could watch a game for 2 hours, right? If I get caught watching like I watch, it'll take me 2 hours to get through Commanders Eagles. But you just learn to pace yourself and try to like, hey, whatever the theme is of the game, know about that theme as you go in so you can hone in on. And then by Wednesday, if I want to go back and look and say, hey, the third rusher had an especially good day, you know, then I can talk about those things later in the week. But Sunday, it's a mad dash to get. And Nolan and the guys do a great job of, hey, if I say, get me the box counts for this team, I got them in 5 minutes. You know, like we
Right.
talk about the Falcons right now. One thing I've been talking about is Desmond Ridder, the passing game, how good their running attack is, and they're running into loaded boxes, you know, and getting the math on teams and that sort of thing. These guys have all the access points to the data through whatever we use. And so it's just my job to call the things out that I want, and their job to say, hey, you might want to look at this. And you might want to look at these coverages because they're going to play these coverages this week. That's been another thing, like learning the back end as I go, because when I played, I knew where the safety was rolled up. I knew different coverages, what it meant for pass rush, but I never saw a single play from a safety's point of view. I
Right.
never Mike linebacker, I've never lined up 4 yards off the ball. So that's a big learning curve for me. And I've enjoyed learning while I work.
Were you surprised that the Eagles' defensive line just didn't wreck the Commanders last week?
See, I think
I really
yeah.
thought that was going to be it, right? That
Yeah.
there was no way that offensive line for the Commanders was going to be able to hold up against that Eagles D line. And frankly, I really thought that was going to be the game, and it wasn't.
Well, there were a lot of pressures, and I'll say this, like I thought there'd be more sacks, but I do think, and in the beginning of that Commanders game, y'all came out and threw the ball. And, you know, like
EB's been doing that every week.
it's because of what you saw in the secondary. Now, you did it against the Bills at your own risk, right? Because this is before Trey White goes down the whole thing, and they've had Benford back
That
there, and
defense is really, really
they
good.
got a really good defense. But I think the Eagles front's better. I just think it's one of those things where you come in, you're charged up to try to block these guys and survive. There were some downs late in that game where guys are scratching and clawing and beating cats, but Hal's just keeping it alive and being aggressive, and the throws are there because Eagles secondary is banged up. And quite frankly, I think Hal's not bad. I mean, the throw he made to Logan Wilson in the middle of the field. Logan
right up the
Thomas,
seam.
sorry, the Logan Wilson's the damn linebacker in my head from
Right,
Cincy.
but
Logan
yeah, it
Thomas,
was a seed.
yeah, it was a seed, and he had the Milton draped all over him. Like these are really big time throws, and he wasn't like getting the ball out quick. He was holding it to damn near 3 seconds. I think the Eagles got after those guys, but I just don't think they got home as much. But in big situations like the Josh Sweat sack in the red zone, That's 3 points. That's 4 points off the board because that's why they kick a field goal and don't go up 10 at that point. You know, it's Hassan Reddick late in the game on 3rd and 10. It's BG's pressure that keeps you guys from converting in overtime. It's fucking
you like going for 2 there if you're Ron Rivera.
Yeah,
definitely, right?
Yeah,
he says in the next day press conference he thought the guys were gassed, but so you were going to send them out there to run 75 yards?
Yeah, what do you think the Eagles are? Like they're tired too. You know, if I'm on defense, I'm praying they don't go for 2.
Right.
Because I know we're the better team. And if we get to overtime, I feel pretty good at home. Great kicker, good run game. But Ron decided to take it to OT.
So weird.
It is weird.
So weird. Man, not the riverboat anymore. He's the paddle boat now.
Paddle boat
guy. He's down the lazy river with you boys.
Hey, exactly. Paddle boat Ron. I'll take him out on the river.
How much longer is lazy river time? Getting cold out there yet?
It's over. It's over. As soon as football season starts, like it's over because I can get out on the river. Like today, I would have loved to get out on the river, but some about it, I like the dead of summer. I like the humidity in the air. I like taking a bath.
Do you have a favorite season?
Yeah,
football season would be easy.
It's river season. No, it's river season. That's my favorite season.
I always tell people
late May to
I love
July.
Football so much, but I love the summertime.
Yeah, dude, it's summer, bro. It's summer. And you know, like you get out now, there's leaves falling out of the tree. People like fall colors. Fuck that.
You've already got your hoodie on. Like, I don't want to be hoodie season already.
No, I like that because I'm a big man, so I like the big man wear.
This shirt I've got on today. You ever have one of these where like the neck hugs the shit out of you, and you're just like,
yeah, dude.
Why is the neck all like
you just got to pull that thing, dude.
Ripping on it.
Yeah, but yeah, I like the summer.
I watched this. I was watching a podcast the other day, and I think maybe it was Jason Tatum from the Celtics, and he essentially said everybody has different views of what a superstar is. And players have a definite version of what a superstar is. How many of those quarterbacks do we have in the NFL right now? A legit, put me in the game, we're winning quarterback.
Yeah, so superstar from a standpoint of like who they are as a player, not the commodity, right?
He would like for Jason Tatum's record, like if I'm on your team, we have a chance to win this. And
it's randomized based on like it's
like
not
they
like,
were saying
it
like
could be any team, but I'm saying like in this exercise though for quarterbacks,
yes,
you put them on 32 random teams and see how they do. So like it's an aggregate in hypothetical land of how well they do in any weather. Like as long as that guy,
how many are on the elite level for you?
Okay, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, you've got, I think Burrow's there.
When he's right,
he's healthy, hurt. Right? I think Burrow's on the fringe of that. You know, like he's elite though. I mean, fuck. I mean, I'm forgetting people because run me through a couple.
Well, I know.
Lamar. I think Lamar, obviously.
I think Lamar's elite.
I think, yeah, I do because I take the whole consideration. Like, what does that quarterback do? It's not just passing anymore. And I think Lamar's a great passer. If you look at what Monken's doing up there.
Dude, I was just going to say that.
Like,
he's a beast. You know, I'm a Georgia guy. So, I mean, I was sad when he left. That dude gets it.
He's doing a great job, and the run game's great and everything, but the run game isn't totally dependent on Lamar. But if you wanted to create offense in an inopportune situation with your quarterback, you can do that with Lamar. Same thing with Josh. Josh is like a one-man band. Now, they don't use
Stafford
him in the quarterback.
There? I don't think he's there now. Was Stafford ever at that level?
Yes. Yes, because if you look at like Stafford, if you talk to quarterbacks, like as far as the thrower of the football, like he's like ungodly talented, and he's also tough and has won. Once you've won a Super Bowl and you have that statistical output, I put you in the elite category. Now, I'm not saying every year, I'm not saying right now, but I do think so. And if you look at Stafford's numbers this year, he's up there. Like, but they've been playing.
Yeah, and they got no weapons.
They got Puka Nacua, and they're getting him wide open.
He's good, but
he's wide open. So I would put those guys in that category. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody that somebody's.
Jalen Hurts, does he get in there?
Oh yeah, he's there because to me Jalen throws a beautiful deep football.
Did he surprise you coming out of college? Like I liked him and I thought he'd be good. Most guys don't improve their accuracy kind of the way he has. It's been a little bit surprising though.
He has improved. I think when you look at Jalen like bouncing around so much, one thing I really respect about him is his resiliency. Like I don't know if that's a word of his. I think it's resiliency. It's not resilience. That's what people fuck up all the time. So he just, whether it's having to sit behind Carson or whether it's taking all that heat, just getting drafted there, like all of a sudden he's public enemy number one to a lot of people because quarterbacks have these hives, man. And I was a Carson fan, but I also, as soon as Jalen showed us what he could do, I was like, okay, well. And I think when you add the element of leadership, his ability to add into the quarterback run game, he really has shown me that he can make throws all over the field. So I like Jalen as kind of that fringe elite guy.
Herbert,
yeah,
definitely elite.
Dude, look at Herbert this year, dude. Nobody's watching because the defense is a train wreck. It's not a good, well-coached football team, but yeah, give me Herbert. Like if you're talking about starting a team out, like it's like a fantasy draft.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a guy take a step like Geno Smith did? He's funny, right? Like who waits till year 7? Like it's got to be around year 7, 6 last year maybe to get it going. Can't just be a scheme thing, can it? I mean, have you ever seen a guy finally get it going that late in his career?
I think for him, like think about where he played. He played in New York, for the Jets, and I don't think of that as like an offensive factory around that time. And also there was he had to grow up a little bit. Like I think he grew up a lot. There was a fight. There was all that shit, like stuff you just like the quarterback shouldn't be in shit like this. And then once you're like a backup, it's hard to get back because people get this confirmation bias. They frame your addition to the team in a totally different way. It is a unique thing because not only did he take a big hiatus from being the guy, but he's about as good a thrower of the football as anybody in the NFL. Like I'd put him on that fringe elite. Like if you look at the last year and a half, as far as a pure passer, the fucking guy, it's like, where has he been hiding? But that's really what we're talking about. So like you could put Tua in the conversation, although I wouldn't put him before any of the guys I'm talking about, because I do think when it gets to play breaks down, maybe you don't have Tyreek, maybe Mike's not your coach in this hypothetical situation. I worry about a guy like that a little bit, but he'd be in that fringy category to me. Just because you brought up Geno as like it's a special category.
Where's Goff sit? He's an interesting one for me, right?
Not elite.
Drafted, went to a Super Bowl. I like him in this offense. I mean, I'd take Goff right now on my team.
Yeah. I respect the hell out of Jared Goff. I respect the hell out of Jared Goff because I think he's way mentally tougher than people think about. Right. Like I think
dude, seems like
cool. All his teammates like him. At the end of his LA stint, I feel like McVay and him, like McVay kind of like the way Dable doesn't like Daniel Jones. I feel like McVay was kind of like that, but maybe worse. And it's really confounding to a guy like McVay, like because he is an offensive genius, and this guy that's holding me back. But I think it's a perfect situation in Detroit because you see what empowering a player does. Remember when he almost beat the Rams his first year there and people were just pulling for him? It's like all of a sudden, at first it's a cute story, but the team is built, and we talk about this a lot. If you have a starting quarterback who's like a median starting quarterback, like right in the middle, and I think Goff is like in that middle to 10 range. I don't know. I haven't added it up, but you need to build right around that person. It's like Daniel Jones. We're talking about, he's got 140 million in his pocket, and I think he's a decent quarterback.
Me too.
But not when things are broken.
Well,
look at the Lions.
I'm not going to stand up for the Giants. It's not my job, but no Andrew Thomas, no Saquon Barkley. I mean, but who asked for the kid, right?
It is, but go back and look at some of the throws he made the other night and didn't make. So compounding on top of all the issues is like there's something going on, whether it's scheme or it's pressure or that sort of thing. And I mean like macro pressure. But the point I'm making, Dable was mad, but you see that coming out in him. I think that the point I'm making is Jared Goff set up for success where Daniel Jones is set up for failure. And I don't think there's that much air between the two guys. just like
Right.
any NFL football
Right.
player. And it's even more magnified when you're a quarterback. Context matters. Like the team you're on, the situations you're in. You look at two defensive ends the same way. All right, well, how much is that guy getting 4-minute mode? He's not seeing as much shots. The coverage isn't as good. Maybe you got a guy who's got twice as many sacks on the team, but he's got 2 number 1 corners outside. He might eat off other people on the line. There's all types of things. What scheme is the guy in? Same thing with quarterbacks, but then blast it out. It's even tougher when a guy doesn't have the good stuff around him.
It's interesting that you brought that up, Chris, because kind of what I wanted to ask you next is Chase Young is back. It feels like, and he's been productive since he's been here as far as affecting the quarterback. But it feels like since he's been back, Jonathan Allen has been less effective. And I'm curious, from a man that played on the defensive line, particularly at end, like, how does that work? How long does it take to kind of get into that rhythm where you can look to the guy next to you and say, all right, come on, let's go do that. On the other side with Payne and Montez, I think they've already got that. They've been doing it for a while. It feels like Jonathan slows down when Chase gets back. Is that unusual or?
Well, I'd have to look, but I don't think growing pains are unusual. Sometimes two rushers just aren't a good marriage next to each other. Like me and Mike Bennett had so much fun and we're great friends, but sometimes we were like the married couple that was like, why are you on my side of the bed? Like Mike would like to line up in like a 5 when he was supposed to be a 3. And I'm like, all right, I don't have an edge rush at this stage of my career. Where am I supposed to go? That's like where I want to go. And so like we had to learn each other. And by the time we learned each other, we had a lot of fun and we were having fun anyways, because it's hard not to have fun together. But like there is a time. And then me and Fletcher, for instance, or me and BG, when I got to Philly, me and Fletch took a liking to each other. We just enjoyed each other. And then we were lined up next to each other. And we got to realize pretty quickly that like we were going to have fun doing this. And it was easy to communicate. But it's not always easy to communicate. Sometimes it's hard to tell a guy, hey, could you do a little less of this? Or so by the time, we're 8 games in, me and Fletch, it's a look. It's just like,
right.
And he knows I'm taking the inside, or I know he's so good at jetting up the field and his path is super linear. I could just play off him, like, and the situations based on third down. Are you running power to your side? Is he the balance up guy? Is he the hot guy? There's all types of things that are going on. It seems simple, but it takes time. And I think Chase Young's a good player. I think Chase Young can be a good player in the league. He's got to stay healthy, right? But I've always thought when I saw Chase Young, good, solid player. And I think the expectations are always going to be tough. But he's got to learn to and I'm sure he has over the last couple of years, deal with it, because he had these huge clowny kind of expectations. He's and I think he's on a D line where he can't fully stand out. They're all good, and so I think it's a good problem to have. It's just got to be Chase got to wake up in the morning and say, I want to be the best version of myself. Everybody's going to want me to have 15 sacks. If you can get 8 sacks a year, that's a huge fucking win. There's a lot of rushes you pick in the
idea
top
that
5.
you have to get over double digits is crazy, right? I mean,
I mean, you could pick a guy in the top 5. He could be a good all around player, 8-10 a year, and fans might complain, but nobody in the building's like, oh, why did we draft Chase Young? Just be that guy, and embrace it.
How do you kind of live that balance, particularly in this day and age where all the quarterbacks seemingly are moving, like to get in those, you're getting aggressive, and at the same time, you're trying to hope not to see a guy run right by you. It's got to be frustrating in today's day with all the mobile quarterbacks.
Well, the most frustrating thing in today's day and age, I think, is the timing of the passing game, also the way the run and the pass marry together. Look at a lot of the pre-snap motion stuff we're talking about all the time. Teams are, by the time Miami drops back to throw the ball, and they're going to throw it in 2.2 seconds, unless you're playing the Bills and they got the guys to cover, you're just not going to sniff him, and you're spending your pre-snap time where you should be thinking about your rush plan or looking at keys. Oh, fuck, there's a jet motion. Oh, what's that? Oh, why is that tight end? The schemes are tough, and
why don't teams use motion on every snap?
Well, I mean, we were just talking about this the other day. I think every team should incorporate motion. It's like the more down the line we get with this, like you talk about the future of football. At one point, it was like San Francisco. Now it feels like Miami, but it's all predicated on window dressing and like out of a West Coast rooted system. So, like how do you dress up this core concept to make it layered in a way that like guys are spending time communicating before the play? Look at all the injuries in the secondary every week in the NFL. I mean, there are tons of different combinations that teams are playing with. I remember a couple weeks ago, Dallas, when they lost, Diggs.
Knocked me out of
They,
my
they
survivors here, by the
yeah,
way.
you
Good
and a
for
lot of
y'all.
people I talked to, but the they put a lot of man. They like kept it simple that game, and I kind of thought it might be because communication is an issue when you come off an injury like that, where these guys have all been working together. If you add that extra layer, it's funny. All these years, this rule, you were able to do it. You can get to full speed on a jet motion. You get a head start.
Yeah.
You can do half field motion. There's a whole part of the game that nobody was playing, and now it's like, oh, it's different than just having to reset your defense. Like, oh, that guy's like the fastest guy on the field. So the play has started. Like the play,
Right.
how early can you start the play, and how much
Right.
can you layer that? Because more time guys are spending doing this, the less time they're doing locking into whatever they have to do that play.
That's incredible.
And
It's
as a
incredible.
rusher, it's like another layer, and usually we don't deal with layers. So I think
I think Miami used emotion every snap. If it wasn't this last week, it was the week before.
yeah. And then the
Crazy.
mobility, you said it.
Yeah.
Like the mobility of quarterbacks all-time high. And I used to struggle to get guys down. Like I had 70 in my career. I might have had 50 in today's NFL. In the 80s, I'd have had 100. Okay.
Yes.
But like now it's hard. It's a challenge. You got to win your rush, and you got to be like that elite playmaker, which I was not. I was like, I could rush my ass off and win rushes, but I wasn't always an elite playmaker in the backfield. A lot of times I create for other people or miss. And I think now it's like a skill within a skill. Is like, you're not just a rusher, you got to be a finisher. And then you have to be on groups that understand how to rush as a group, because that's what it is. It's pocket integrity. It's knowing that like, hey, he's taking the inside move. They used to work on Dave Craig. It's not going to work on Lamar Jackson. We're going to have a gash. And if we're in man, we're fucked.
Yes, and they'll blow right by you.
Yeah.
Chris, this has been great. Who do you like for the Bears Commanders game tonight?
I like the Commanders. As soon as we hang up this Zoom, I'm going to put a fat teaser in, and the first half is going to be the Commanders.
I still can't figure out how the line went from a touchdown to 5.5. I don't understand how that line moved that way. And then
Maybe
corner isn't going to play. Eddie Jackson's not going to play. It sounds like Brisker might not play. I mean,
maybe everybody was betting the Bears.
Had to have been.
I mean, I think maybe they're just trying to balance things out. I have no idea. I mean, like it's like I looked at the Giants line of 1.5, and I tricked myself trying to trick Dick Vegas, because I was like, I'm going to bet the Giants because there's something up. But really all they were probably doing was like playing into the New York market and saying like, let's get this PD Public team signed up for it and make it easier to bet. I don't know. I don't know. I felt like the Giants should have been catching more points than that.
What's Chris Long getting dressed up for Halloween this year?
So
a little early. You got a couple of weeks, I know, but
so the first thing I have to worry about dressing up for, I'm going to break this here. I mean, I've talked about it on my show, but next week I'm going to set a Guinness Book of World Records. I intend on doing it. I'm going up to the Delaware River. I'm going to be the man who floated the longest distance in a pumpkin. It was broken last year by a guy named Dwayne in Missouri.
A real pumpkin.
A real pumpkin. 1,000-pounder.
Pumpkin? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I gotta figure out what costume I'm gonna wear there, because I'm gonna be on the river for like 24 to 30 hours, maybe.
Okay.
I was thinking like George Washington crossing the Delaware, but I don't know if everybody. Yeah, I'm not crossing the Delaware. But I got to think about. I was thinking the underdog mask, maybe the whole thing. So I've been on Amazon. My wife, because we got a young baby, wants to be
Mhm.
Dr. Evil and make the baby mini me.
It's
So,
all good.
which
It's all
is
good.
great. And my wife's super hot, but like, if you're like, hey, I get, you hot girl Halloween, and she's like, I'm being Dr. Evil. I'm putting on like a bald wig and the whole thing. Like, that's not as fun for me.
You know, I won't ask you if you're into bald chicks here on the
No.
show. I won't get you into trouble.
I don't want to
All right, man.
alienate the
Listen, I know
bald
you're
chick
busy.
demo. Yeah.
I know you're busy, man. I always appreciate this time and have
Yeah,
a
dude.
great
Great to
time.
see you.
So
Great to see
I
you.
appreciate you.
Go commies.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.